set. Another defendant, Helmer Obispo Hernandez, is a fugitive. He's pictured here. In addition to the charges in the indictment, he is also charged in a federal criminal complaint with threatening to kill a federal law enforcement officer. While search warrants were being executed in Los Angeles on Friday, he telephoned a member of the investigative team and threatened to kill that agent and his family members by cutting off their heads. Those actions demonstrate just how violent this organization is. A fourth defendant is in custody in Oklahoma in connection with the fatal car accident in 2023. The transnational criminal organization operated for at least a dozen years and specialized in smuggling illegal immigrants from Guatemala to the United States. The movement of those illegal immigrants within the United States, especially between Phoenix and Los Angeles, and the harboring of those illegal aliens in the United States. According to the indictment, associates of the organization in Guatemala solicited thousands of illegal immigrants to come to the United States. Those associates then accepted payment between $15,000 and $18,000 for each smuggled alien to come to the United States via Mexico. They coordinated the movement from Guatemala to the United States. Mexican smuggling organizations transported the illegal immigrants from Mexico into the United States, initially to Arizona. Once the illegal immigrants were in the United States, they held them at stash houses, where they were later picked up by the organization's lieutenants. The illegal immigrants then, for an additional fee, were transported and moved to various stash houses throughout the United States, including Los Angeles. Those who did not pay their fees were held hostage, including at a stash house here in the Westlake district of Los Angeles. This organization caused deaths. In November 2023, while transporting illegal immigrants, defendant Jose Paxtor Ola caused a car accident in Elk City, Oklahoma, where he was transporting people illegally. That car accident resulted in 7 deaths. 3 of those individuals are minors, including a 4-year-old child. The actions of this human smuggling organization demonstrates a complete disregard for the nation's immigration laws. As the Attorney General has said, we are doubling down on our efforts to enforce long-standing criminal immigration laws. The failure to enforce those laws fuels these criminal organizations. I thank Homeland Security Investigations, the United States Border Patrol, the Inglewood Police Department for their diligent efforts investigating this dangerous and violent criminal organization. I also thank our prosecutors, Sean Nelson and Elia Herrera, for their work ensuring that these charges were brought and this organization dismantled. The human smuggling case that I've spoken about was part of a week-long series of events focused on revitalizing existing immigration enforcement activities, which include cases in which illegal immigrants were victimized, other cases where people here illegally exploited the nation's immigration laws, and dozens of criminal complaints this week were filed against illegal aliens with criminal records who had been removed from the United States after felony convictions and then returned. These included individuals convicted of violent crimes like manslaughter, assaults on police officers, and drug trafficking. This area of criminal activity is a priority, top priority for the Department of Justice, and our efforts to target individuals participating in criminal activity here will continue. I'll now turn it over to the Deputy Special Agent Charged from Homeland Security.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about an important investigation that was run by ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, and Border Patrol, and prosecuted by U.S. Attorney's offices in the Central District. This investigation targeted a prolific human smuggling organization that was responsible for moving roughly 20,000 immigrants into the United States. As mentioned previously, this investigation also resulted in the death of 7 migrants as they were transporting east into the interior United States, including a 4-year-old child. The organization would typically bring in their clients into the Los Angeles and Phoenix area and transport their money into bank accounts, laundering those funds and depositing those into Los Angeles-based financial institutions for banks in the region. Human smuggling is a grave and dangerous endeavor that people who are mostly desperate and looking for a better life engage in, not realizing the possible dangers and the end results, which sometimes involve trafficking, exploitation, coercion, and long-enduring trials and tribulations to get to their end destination. The illegal activity not only endangers their lives of those being smuggled, but also the national security and public safety. We work with our partners, U.S. Border Patrol, state and locals, and U.S. Attorney's Office to ensure that people who bring these endangered individuals into the United States who are just looking for a better life to justice, especially in instances where, as in this, life has been lost. It's important for us to get a message out to the public to ensure that information is being provided to ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, to Border Patrol, and our partners so that we can combat these crimes as they're happening. We ask for the public's assistance in calling us at 1-866-347-2423 with any information that you may have regarding smuggling organizations and human trafficking organizations that are exploiting the vulnerable in this society. Thank you. Yes, last name is Angebranddt. Dwayne, D-W-A-Y-N-E. Thank you.
I'll now turn it over to Chief Greg Bovino, Chief Border Patrol El Centro Sector.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Again, my name is Gregory Bovino. I'm the Chief Patrol Agent of the premier sector in the U.S. Border Patrol, the El Centro Sector. I'd like to thank Joe McNally, Acting United States Attorney Central District, Homeland Security Investigations, as well as allied law enforcement agencies who all took part in the important takedown of this Turco transnational criminal organization. Border Patrol specifically provided approximately 50 agents this past Friday for this takedown. Those 50 agents were from 3 different sectors: the San Diego sector, the Yuma sector, and the El Centro sector, primarily from our Special Operations Detachment, which includes BORTAC, the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, BORSTAR, the Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue Teams, as well as our Sector Intelligence Unit, K-9 teams, and our Strategic Communications. This Turco organization, as you've already heard, is very dangerous, very prolific organization. 2021 was the first year that Border Patrol agents came into contact with this transnational criminal threat. Those were agents from our Indio station on Interstate 10 noticed a unique phenomenon of Guatemalan illegal aliens being transported westbound from points in New Mexico and Arizona. Further investigation revealed through eastbound stops with large amounts of cash and illegal aliens that this was more than just a regional smuggling organization. This was a complex coast-to-coast smuggling organization, a coast-to-coast organization. At that time, our partners from Homeland Security Investigations joined us in this investigation, as well as the United States Attorney's Office here in Central District. And in the ensuing years, a lot of good work was accomplished by all parties involved, resulting in that takedown this past Friday. I'll close by saying that border security is created. Let me say that again. Border security is created. It doesn't just happen. It's created through innovation, forward thinking, and moving the ball down the field. This Turco organization was destroyed, dismantled, top to bottom this past Friday. And that's what we're after here. that is what we are after here. With our partners at HSI, U.S. Attorney's Office, and all other law enforcement agencies, one of the most complex, far-ranging, far-reaching smuggling organizations is now out of business. On behalf of the men and women of the United States Border Patrol, it's time to turn and burn. Turn and burn. We're turning and burning onto that next target. As soon as we leave this conference room, we're on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'll now take questions. Yes, sir.
So you said that they are responsible for transporting over 20,000 migrants. Can you tell us how you arrived at that figure and how much time did it take them to smuggle that many people into the United States?
Yes, so the organization had been operating for more than a decade based on information that we found during search warrants and other parts of the investigation. The 20,000 number is based on material that we seized during a search warrant. Trafficking organizations, just like any criminal enterprise, oftentimes tracks and keeps business records. And we found records showing a little more than 20,000 individuals being smuggled to the United States. I think it was around 20,800, so approximately 20,000 based on material that we found during the course of the search warrants.
May I ask you a couple of questions about the Oklahoma crash? Were all the victims in the vehicle? Was it a result of a DUI, and was it a result of them being chased by ICE?
Yeah, I'll refer you to the indictment. It was not a result of them being chased by ICE. It was an accident that resulted during smuggling, and all of the victims were in the vehicle. Yes?
Was this Guatemalan man the one that you caught on last Friday in 41 Street in Avalon?
So the individual here, Obispo Hernandez, is a fugitive and unknown where he is, whether that's in the United States or Guatemala, but he's a fugitive. He was not one of the individuals arrested. He is the individual who, during the execution of search warrants on Friday, telephoned one of the investigators from Homeland Security, one of the agents working on the case, and said that he was going to kill that agent and kill that agent's family members, including his children, by cutting off their heads. That was Mr. Hernandez.
Do you have an idea if this man is related to the one that was arrested on Friday on Avalon and 42 Sister?
I don't know the relationship between that individual and Obispo Hernandez. Other questions?
A couple things. I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the 20,000 people who were smuggled in and essentially victims of this group into the U.S., over what time frame was that again? I want to make sure I'm clear.
I think it's roughly a decade period. Well, let me break it out. I can tell you that the organization operated for roughly a decade. The exact time period of what those 20,000 victims covers, I don't know. I don't know the exact time period.
And you had said that they would take money from people and put it in bank accounts. Roughly how much money are we talking about?
Well, $15,000 to $18,000 was what was charged for every individual who was smuggled into the United States. As I said, individuals would then be held sometimes at a stash house. If they were not, their fees were not paid. They were held hostage, sometimes for months at a time. There was violence threatened against family members, often down in Guatemala. They would tell the individual at the stash house that, we're going to harm your family in Guatemala if you don't pay. And obviously, they also the actions resulted in the deaths of 7 individuals, including a 4-year-old child. Yeah.
Question, of the 20,000 individuals, approximately what percentage were women?
I don't have that information. We can find that for you.
And was this a cartel related? I mean, I'm assuming it was, but I want to put it out there. I mean, the cartels are known for being extremely violent like this.
Yeah, look, what I can say is, as a general matter, Smuggling organizations smuggle all kinds of things, as you know, not just humans. They do drugs, they use those same supply chains. And in order to exist in Mexico and in Guatemala, you have to have very significant criminal partnerships and ties to cartels in order to be able to operate as a general matter. Yes?
Can you speak on what makes these defendants eligible for the death penalty and what your thoughts on that is?
Yeah, they are death eligible because their actions here, smuggling for private financial gain, resulted in the deaths of individuals, and so the statute includes a statute that includes a potential death penalty.
Sir, when you're talking about cartels, are you talking about the Sinaloa cartel or cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación?
I'm talking as a general matter that human smuggling organizations only thrive when they form partnerships and work with cartels. But for that, they're not going to be able to operate and engage in the type and scope of criminal conduct that you've seen in the indictment. One more question? Somebody who hasn't had a chance to ask one?
Okay, I have a question for the H side.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So it's mind-boggling to think that only 4 people are responsible for such a large number
Sure.
of people being smuggled across the border. Are you looking for other suspects other than these 4 guys that you already have? Is there any other criminal activity?
So we've gone after, with this indictment, the leadership, and the reason that we've done that is that's the most efficient and effective way to quickly dismantle it. I will tell you that the investigation remains ongoing. In order for an organization like this to operate, it requires criminal partners, not just in the United States, but in Guatemala, who are recruiting the people and then threatening violence when fees aren't paid. It requires criminal partners in Mexico, and our investigation into this group's activity continues. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Today we're going to talk about why I went to Washington, D.C. this past week and the broader goal for the Democratic Party. And I've got 2 interviews. I speak with AOC about Republicans bailing on town halls and the Trump administration's threats against her personally. And I'm joined by Jasmine Crockett to discuss what happens when she herself goes into deep red districts. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So a little bit of a different episode this week. If you watch this channel, you've probably seen that I've done a lot of interviews lately in person. I live in LA. I generally shoot my interviews remotely. I've actually only been to DC a handful of times, maybe a dozen. I think the first time I was ever in that city was when I interviewed President Biden back in 2022. Anyway, the last couple...
Let me go back to what happened in the Oval Office the other day. I call it a smackdown of Zelensky.
Smackdown.
It looked really rough, but then again, at the end of the day, you may have your deal back. So is that all the art of the deal? Or what specifically ticked you off?
Well, you know, he was able to, it was like taking candy from a baby, what he did. He's a smart guy.
Who's the baby? Probably Biden.
And he's a tough guy. And he took money out of this country under Biden.
I knew it. Oh my God, I knew it. He was so dumb. Yep, see, I told you guys, that's what it was. I knew it.
Like candy from a baby.
Mm-hmm.
It was so easy. With that same attitude. And I just don't think he's grateful. We gave him, in my opinion, $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion. Mm-hmm. We gave him $350 billion, and he's talking about the fact that they have fought, and there's a bravery, because somebody has to use the weapons. But without those weapons, don't forget, I was the one that gave him the javelins that was able to knock down all the tanks.
How could we forget?
Obama gave nothing. Look, if I were president, that would have never happened. You wouldn't have had Russia going into Ukraine. You wouldn't have had the whole situation with Hamas and October 7th would have never happened.
What's the breakdown to the $350 billion? Basically, Trump said we gave him $350 billion. So that's the way it is. Yeah.
Because Iran was broke.
Yeah.
They had no money.
That's
they weren't
right.
giving it to Hamas or Hezbollah or anybody else. You would have never had the worst evacuation anyone's ever seen, which is Afghanistan. which was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. And you know what else you wouldn't have had? You wouldn't have had inflation. We had record-setting inflation under Biden. It was a killer.
You
and
may
it's
get
one
it
of the
again.
reasons I won the election.
But you may get it again with these tariffs, right? I
You may
mean,
get
one CEO said to me, my input costs have already started to go up. I'm going to have to raise prices.
In the meantime, guess what? Interest rates are down for the last 3-4 days at good levels. I mean, you know, when you add interest rates, you're talking about it's gone down. I've been saying, let's get interest rates down. You know, nobody ever gets rich when the interest rates are high because people can't borrow money. Interest rate.
I think the people that are giving out money do.
It's going down. You know what else is
Yeah.
going down? What have I been trying to get down? Energy. Energy's going down. I'd love to see energy go down. You know, energy is really what caused it. They screwed up my energy.
I had to
the
start a
most
bank.
energy, and they screwed it up. Then they went back to it. It was going through the roof. They went back to some drilling, but it was gone. It was hopeless. It was lost. But energy's gone down, and interest rates have gone up over the last week. That's a big thing. I love that.
Do you expect Zelensky to come back? Do you expect to do that rare earth minerals deal?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll happen.
Are you sure there's the content that you think there is there? Because some people were questioning if, in fact, there is the, you know, the titanium and the lithium, all those the rare earth minerals. You think it is rich with those things?
Well, I do. I mean, I've had it checked. I've had it checked by the best. It's very valuable. But with all that being said, Biden should have never put up $350 billion. He should have equalized with Europe. All he had to do is say, you got to stay even with us. They're in for 100. We're in for 350. How does that? And we have an ocean in between us, right? We're not in the danger that they are. They are in much greater danger, if you call it danger. He should have never done that. You know, the other thing with Europe that bothers me? They've given Russia more money, by far, for buying their oil than they put into Ukraine. So they're paying all this money to Russia, and we're in there for $350 billion. Biden should have never done that.
I spoke with the president of Poland.
You have to understand that some people might not realize why he keeps repeating the $350 billion thing. The reason is that, if you guys ever saw the movie Beetlejuice, is that if you say it 3 times close enough together, it actually turns into being true. Yeah, so that's the 3rd time. Now it's true.
The other day, President Duda has great respect for you. And I said to him, you know, what if the U.S. walks away and stays away? Here's what he said. Without the United States, do you believe that Europe is capable of offering meaningful security to Ukraine?
I would like to believe it, but experience to date shows that this has not been the case. The entire history so far of
You can tell he's from Poland because his name will get spelled wrong.
the last 3 years of the war shows that without American support, Ukraine will not survive.
Are you comfortable with that? The fact that you walked away and Ukraine may not survive?
Yeah.
Well, it may not survive anyway, but, you know, we have some weaknesses with Russia. You know, it take 2. Look, it was not going to happen, that war, and it happened. So now we're stuck with this mess. Think of what he stuck me with. Open borders where we have 21 million people came into our country, many of whom should not be here. Many are criminals. Many are criminals. Many murderers. Murderers. Drug dealers. Drug lords.
That's bad.
We got that. We have the whole mess with Israel on October 7th. We have all of the ramifications from the worst and dumbest withdrawal in history.
Both Ukraine and Israel were both attacked by aggressors. Is America treating both countries similarly? Are they?
That's a good question. That's a great question.
Are they treating the aggressors similarly?
I think so. Look, they're
Are you favoring one over the other?
They're very different places, okay? Very, very different. You're talking about different levels of power. You're talking about different parts of the world. The Middle East has been under attack forever. So you look, when wasn't it under attack? And then we came along and did the Abraham Accords, which was unheard of.
Have you been as tough on Russia as you've been on Hamas? I mean, what do you want to say to
Well, I've
critics?
been much tougher because I haven't done to Hamas. That's been Israel that has to do to Hamas. But Israel does tell me what's going on. I think I've been very tough to Russia. Tougher than anybody's ever been to Russia, if you think about it.
Nobody's
First of
been
all,
tougher.
We had the Russia hoax, which was a very bad thing. Could have led to a war. And that was started.
This was in 2016, where everybody said that he wasn't the legitimate. Remember the hashtag Not My President? You guys remember that? A little bit of a vintage meme.
By Schiff and all these lowlifes.
I know.
They're total lowlifes. And
yeah,
it was a fake deal. The 51 intelligence
he will not
agencies.
divide us. I remember that.
I took all their passes away. They can't participate anymore. These guys know it came from Hunter Biden's laptop from hell, which came from his bathroom and/or his bedroom. Okay, not a pretty sight. But this was a Hunter Biden thing. They said it was from Russia. No, I've been very tough. Remember this: I'm the one that stopped the Russian pipeline, Nord Stream 2.
Oh.
I stopped it. Biden came in, and he approved it. I'm the one that put sanctions on Russia. I'm the one that gave the javelins against Russia. No, I've been very tough, but I got along well with Putin. And because I got along well, they say, he's so... Nobody's ever been... Putin would be the first to say it. Nobody's been tougher than Trump.
Man.
And Biden hasn't been tough. Biden's done nothing. He was a weak, pathetic man.
So is there anything else you want to say to the critics?
Damn, he really going in on Biden. Jesus, he's shitting on him.
To say you chose a side in the Ukraine-Russia story, and that's Russia. Because, you called Zelensky a dictator and you had the fight.
Nobody has been tougher on Russia than Donald Trump. Nobody. And they know that. They know that. Just look at the things I just told you. The pipeline, I stopped it. The biggest job they've ever done was the pipeline, Nord Stream 2. Nobody ever heard of it until I came along. They were building it happily. They were going to supply Germany and everybody else all over Europe. And what did I do? I stopped it. The biggest economic job they've ever had, I stopped it. Biden got in. On the second day, he approved it. He said, let it go forward.
Damn.
It was totally stopped.
Third time
Just
it's
that
true
one
now?
thing
That's the
alone
second
tells
time.
you everything. No, I was tough. At the same time...
Okay, now he just said it. That's the third time. Okay, so yeah, now it is true.
I got along with Putin.
Yeah.
I got along with Kim Jong-un. I got along with President Xi. But nobody was tougher, like on China, than I was.
And then there are reports now that Russia says it will help the United States negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran. What kind of deal with Iran do you want to do? You said they cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
That's the deal.
Well, there are two ways Iran can be handled, militarily or you make a deal. I would prefer to make a deal, because I'm not looking to...
So they either make a deal or Trump just bombs the shit out of them? Okay. I could easily expect that to happen. All right. Yep, stop doing it or we're going to kill you.
Iran. They're great people. I know so many Iranians from this country.
Well, not the leadership.
No, not the leadership.
The
no,
people.
They're very evil people. No, but the people of Iran are great people. But they had a tough regime, and they'd meet and they'd be shot in the streets. I mean, it was a tough deal. But I would rather negotiate a deal. I'm not sure that everybody agrees with me, but we can make a deal that would be just as good as if you won militarily. But the time is happening now. The time is coming up. Something's going to happen one way or the other. I hope that Iran, and I've written them a letter saying, I hope you're going to negotiate, because if we have to go in militarily, it's going to be a terrible thing for them.
You wrote a letter to...
So, damn. Damn. Okay. All right.
The Khomeini?
Yes.
Yeah.
When did you send the letter?
Yesterday.
And you said you better negotiate, or we want you to
I didn't
negotiate?
say you better. I
Okay.
said I hope you're going to negotiate, because it's going to be a lot better for Iran. And I think they want to get that letter. The other alternative is we have to do something, because you can't let them have a nuclear weapon.
You said you wanted to do the Golden Dome. You've got a lot of ideas for America. But then earlier you said you wanted
We got the Golden Dome. We got the gold cards, bro. Like, we're back. Yep. He wouldn't bomb shit. They fight proxy with Israel, or it's World War III. The latter won't happen, or it'll hurt his investment. So I don't know. The Golden Age. Yep. Think about that. The Golden Age. I feel like we got a lot. Make America gold again. Yep.
cut $1 trillion in defense spending, right?
I didn't say I was.
You're not going to. So I was like, which is it? Are you cutting defense spending, or are you building us up?
I never said defense spending.
Okay, because I think you were talking about denuclearization,
Correct.
and that's where the cutting of the spending came in.
I never said cut. No, it's not in these days. I'd love to cut defense spending, but not now. Because you have China, you have Russia, you have a lot of problems.
You got to buy a lot of bombs.
No.
In fact,
no. What I have said is, we spend a lot of money on nuclear missiles, nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
The level of destruction is beyond anything you can even imagine. It's just bad that everybody has to spend all this money on something that, if it's used, it's probably the end of the world.
Wow.
Wow. Damn.
No, what
that's
to say
crazy.
To that?
You know, when I listen to these climate lunatics and they talk about global warming, and they say the ocean's going to rise 1/8 of an inch in the next 300 years.
Yeah.
And, you know,
You don't give a fuck.
and nobody talks about nuclear weapons or some of the other things, but the nuclear weapons in particular right now. And
he's got the
they talk
cards,
about
boys.
The climate. And they talk about the dangers of the climate. But they don't talk about the dangers of a nuclear weapon, which could happen tomorrow. They say in 300 years, I watched Biden for years say the existential threat. He loved the term existential threat.
I use that.
Our greatest existential threat is from the climate. I said, no. The greatest is sitting in shelves in various countries called nuclear weapons that are big monsters that can blow your heads off for miles and miles and miles. And they never mention that.
Man, that's a lot. Big boy, heads off. Yeah, I don't know about that. That's crazy. And it's the day after tomorrow. Do you think if the world actually got rid of their nukes, would some countries keep some secretly? Yeah, I think that they would. I think that the logic is that stop building more of them because we can already blow up the whole world. So, like, we're kind of like at capacity here, right? We don't need to blow up the whole world 2 times. Let's just stop here. And we have some of these, but we don't need infinitely more of them, right? That's the point. Yeah, exactly. I think that's the line of reasoning that he has.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I appreciate you being here. It's great to be here. It's great to talk to some of the incredible people that we have, both at the local level, the Texas state level, and also, of course, our federal border patrol, who are doing so many good things to keep us safe. And I have some bad news and some good news. And the bad news is that because of what Joe Biden did at the southern border for 4 years, we had record increases in migrant crime, in fentanyl deaths, and in just floods and floods of people who shouldn't be in our country who came into the United States of America. We also have a number of ways in which the cartels became more advanced, better warfighters, because Joe Biden opened up the American southern border and allowed the cartels to turn it into their playground. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is, as President Trump said last night at the State of the Union, it turns out we didn't need new laws. We didn't need fancy legislation. We just needed a new president of the United States, and thank God that's exactly what we have. And I will say that the most heartening message that I take away from my visit here at the Texas border is the number of Border Patrol agents who have come up to me and said thank you, or said because of this, we've cut the number of border crossings from 1,500 a day to 30 a day. Or the people who have come up and said we've seen a reduction, an 85% of the number of people who are dying at the American southern border. And every single day that we continue to keep this border safe, that means less migrant crime, that means less fentanyl coming into our communities, that means more safety and security for the people of the United States of America. And of course, we know the border problem, the border crisis under Biden's administration was a national crisis, but it acutely affected the communities right here. And I've already heard heartbreaking stories of people who are still picking up the pieces, local mayors who are still dealing with the budgetary consequences of what the Joe Biden administration allowed to happen at the American southern border. And that, too, is something that President Trump is going to help address, help fix, and help solve. Now, I wanted to bring Secretary Hegseth and Director Gabbard at DNI down here because, one, I obviously enjoy their company, and it's good to have them down here with me looking around today. But unfortunately, we know that because of what's happened, the border crisis has become a matter of national intelligence, and it's also become something that requires the Department of Defense to engage with. I was talking with Paul Perez earlier. The drone technology that the cartels are using requires, unfortunately, a military response and military support. So it was important for Secretary Hegseth to see what's going on because we know that the millions and millions of people who were let in over the last 4 years, many of them are connected to foreign terrorists. It's important for our leader of national intelligence to get a sense of what's here on the ground. So before we take questions from the press, and all of us are willing to take questions, I want to give Secretary Hegseth and then Director Gabbard an opportunity to say a few words themselves. Mr. Secretary.
Well, Mr. Vice President, thank you very much for inviting us. It's great to be here with you, with the director, with our fellow friends in civilian clothes and in other shades of green. This is a demonstration of a true partnership on the southern border. As President Trump has made clear on the campaign trail and from day one and last night, border security is national security. And from the Defense Department, we've watched for a couple of decades other people's borders being secured while ours was open for an invasion of drugs and of violence and of chaos for American communities. That stops under President Trump. And the Defense Department has assets that we can bring to bear, not just troops, not just surveillance, not just equipment, but actual planning capabilities that enhance what Border Patrol is already doing, which is why it's been incredible to hear from our partners about what we've been able to allow them to do, facilitate them, and we've seen it in the numbers. 98% drop in crossings on the southern border. We're not yet at 100% operational control, but we are on our way because that is the mandate that the president has given us. So more resources are coming to this border. We are dedicated to securing it. That's the reason for our trip and our partnership. And I want to thank all the men and women who've been doing it recently in uniform, who have been doing it a long time right here, have dedicated their lives to securing the American people. And at the Defense Department, we are committed to continuing to being a big part of it. So, Mr. Vice President, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great. Now, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your leadership in bringing the country's attention to what has been happening here at the border and the significant change that has already occurred under the short time that President Trump has been in office. Really, what you're seeing here today and what you'll continue to see is a unified effort across President Trump's national security team, the Department of Homeland Security, towards our mission, which is to ensure a safe, free, and prosperous society for Americans. As Director of National Intelligence, there are a number of areas where we are focused. The president talked about in his speech, over 21 million people have come across our borders illegally under Joe Biden's administration. There are many of them that we don't know who they are. They have not been vetted. We don't know where they are. I'll give you one quick example of one of the problems that we are getting after. From Central Asia, there were over 4,000 people who came across our borders using an ISIS-affiliated network. Our National Counterterrorism Center went through and identified those individuals. There were hundreds of them who were either known terrorists or associated with known terrorists. That information was provided to the Biden administration. You may remember in some of the news, a little over 100 of those people were arrested in 2024. Of those who were arrested, Only 8 were either deported or remained in custody. Only 8. The rest of them were released back into our country. Where are they? What are they doing? What may they be plotting? This is just the beginning. There are many, many areas that we need to stay very focused on, working with Department of Homeland Security, working with the FBI to ensure that we're keeping the American people safe. Our Counterterrorism Center is working on making sure that we have that single source for vetting so that we can figure out who is actually in our country and identify those who pose a threat and get them removed. The president's designation of the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations falls directly into this, especially as we're seeing some of the tactics that these cartels are using reflect some of the tactics that we've seen used by Islamist terrorists in countries that many of us have served in overseas. Our mission is very clear. Our objective is to keep the American people safe. I'm grateful to be a part of this team that President Trump has assembled to accomplish that mission. Thank you.
So before I take questions, let me just say 2 final things. First of all, the reason why we've seen, as Pete said, a 98% reduction of border crossings, the reason why this particular site has gone from over 1,500 crossings per day to 30 crossings per day is because President Trump has empowered and, in fact, demanded that his whole government take the task of border control seriously. And that's exactly what we're doing. And of course, and this leads to my final point before we take questions, it is impossible to do without the men and women on the ground who are actually doing the hard work. They just want to be empowered to do their jobs. President Trump has made that possible. So from the bottom of my heart and for a grateful nation, to every person I've met here today, thank you for working hard on the American people's business. It's been an honor to be with you. It's been an honor to see what you do, and we're going to keep on supporting you over the next 4 years. Congressman Gonzalez, thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership. And now we'll take some questions from reporters. Sir.
So, as you guys have been exemplifying for today that border crossings are down, a lot of attention has been turned to the interior since obviously there's been a lot of illegal immigrants. What is, in your opinion, the biggest obstacle to actually carrying out President Trump's mass deportations? Even though, yes, like apprehensions and arrests and deportations have gone up in his first month, but a lot of people are expecting a bigger capacity for deportation. So
So let me say a few things about that. So first of all, Rome wasn't built in a day. And we have seen pretty significant increases in deportations and apprehensions and arrests. But we have to remember that President Biden gutted the entire immigration enforcement regime of this country. We are trying to rebuild so that we actually empower people to enforce the immigration laws of the American people. It is common sense. It's what the American people want us to do. There are a couple of other things that we're working on. I don't want to get ahead of any public announcements, but one of the ways that we wanted to make sure that we're enforcing our border is that we make it easier for people who are here illegally to go back home of their own accord. We don't want to have to go around and arrest every person, but we will enforce the American people's immigration laws. If you're here illegally, the message from our administration is you should go back home, and if you want to come to the United States, apply through the proper channels. That's an important thing that we're doing. And the final thing is this costs money. One of the most important parts of the president's reconciliation priorities is, of course, tax reform on the one hand, and on the other hand, making sure that we get proper resources so that we can pay for the flights, and we can pay for the detention centers, and we can pay for all the components necessary to ensure that we're re-migrating illegal immigrants back to their country of origin. I guarantee it is a part of the president's priorities. We'll keep on working on it. We've made a lot of progress, but we're going to keep on working on it over the remainder of the president's term. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, I want to ask you about border wall and tariffs, but first on the border wall, how do you and the president...
Could you say your outlet, by the way, when you guys ask questions?
Yeah, Reagan Reese, Daily Caller.
Thank you.
How do you and the president find success this term with the border wall, and how much of the southern border wall needs to be walled off before Trump leaves office?
Well, look, I think the president's hope is that by the end of the term, we build the entire border wall. And of course, that's the physical structure of the border wall itself. But we even heard today, there are so many good technological tools, so many great artificial intelligence enabled technologies that allow us, for example, a camera, not a person, but a camera picks up somebody 2 miles away who's about to come across the southern border. Maybe it's livestock, right? maybe it's a critter in the desert, maybe it's a human being with a weapon on their back. We're using artificial intelligence to make us better at the job of border enforcement, but we've got to make sure that technology is deployed across the entire American southern border. We're going to do it as much as we can, as broadly as we can, because that's how we're going to protect the American people's security. Yeah, go ahead.
Last time they were paused because they deployed 10,000 troops to the border. What can they do this time to make the tariffs go away?
Well, what the president has said is we need a sustained commitment from the government of Mexico to take the job of border security seriously. Fentanyl is the single largest cause of death among young Americans, and we know that a substantial portion of it is, the precursors are made in China. They come to Mexico, they're manufactured in Mexico and brought across the border by the Mexican drug cartels. We want to see fewer Americans dying of these terrible fentanyl overdoses, and we're going to apply as much leverage as possible to the Mexican government as possible. In some ways, look, the president obviously cares deeply about the American people. He serves the American people first. I actually think he's doing a huge favor to the people of Mexico, because if they don't get control of these cartels, the people of Mexico are going to wake up in a narco state where the cartels have more power than their own government. President Trump is trying to help. The Mexican government needs to take this issue of immigration enforcement seriously. In the back, yeah.
Mr. Vice President, Ali Bradley, News Nation. So since the designation of the cartels as terrorists, does that give the United States the green light to go into Mexico and to strike them there? I mean, right now, obviously, they've struck in the Houthis in Yemen. So why not, when we've seen cross-border violence, go after them in Mexico? And then my second question is about a designation. I'll follow up on, please.
Go ahead and ask the second question.
Why isn't the Juarez/La Línea cartel designated when it's in one of the most deadliest places on the planet? Juarez has been designated as one of the deadliest cities. It's right across from El Paso. We've talked to community leaders. They say we know Juarez cartel's operating in the U.S. and so are their affiliates. We don't even want to talk about it out loud, though, because then we'll put a target on our back. They're scared. Border Patrol even thought they were designated, but they're not. The State Department didn't tell me why.
So on that, we're looking at additional organizations. Obviously, this is the determination of whether to determine a particular organization, a terrorist organization, is something that we consult with our leaders of the Department of Defense. We also consult with our friends in other governments. We maintain the optionality to designate further organizations, terrorist organizations, if we feel that we need to in order to protect the American people. And I think President Trump has made it very clear he's not going to be shy about designating some of these cartel organizations as terrorists if he thinks he has to protect the American people. Your first question was about
American forces to strike.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So look, I'm not going to make any announcements about any invasions of Mexico here today. The president has a megaphone, and of course he'll speak to these issues as he feels necessary. But what designating cartel organizations allows us to do is deploy the full resources of the United States military to engage in serious border enforcement. Of course, the president is going to make the determination about how we deploy those forces. But our hope is that Mexico takes this job seriously. We don't want to have negative relationships with the Mexican government. We want the Mexican government to help itself, but also in the process to help the American people by taking these organizations seriously. It's going to destabilize the entire country of Mexico, the entire government, if they don't take it more seriously. We're hopeful that they will. And if they don't, then of course, we'll figure out what to do from there.
So, you just mentioned something about invasion of Mexico. Is there any talk or any thoughts about actually U.S. military forces going into Mexico?
No. Next question.
On tariffs, are any other industries other than automotive reaching out to you guys to carve out special deals? And did the automotive industry know this was coming before today?
Well, a number of industries have reached out to us to ask us for exceptions to the tariffs, but I think the president's been very clear here that he wants the tariffs to apply broadly. He doesn't want to have 500 different industries getting 500 different carve-outs, and the way to avoid application of the tariffs is to have your factory and have your facility in the United States of America. That is the way. Invest in America. That is how you will avoid being penalized by these tariffs. Sir.
Vice President,
KSAT 12, John Paul Barajas. You've been talking about the improvements that your administration has done here with the crossings. Can you talk about the decline prior to President Trump taking office under the Biden administration?
Well, I think like so many Americans, apparently members of the Mexican drug cartel figured out in November and December after the election that Joe Biden was asleep at the wheel and they had to be dealing with the then president-elect and now president. If you look at what drove the declines before the inauguration, people will tell you they knew that Donald Trump was coming back into office. They knew he was going to take border enforcement seriously. And so they were already getting ahead of actually cutting down those illegal crossing numbers. We saw that from the Mexican government, of course, because we were threatening some economic sanctions against them. But we also saw it from the cartels themselves. And even today, because, of course, it doesn't, it takes a little time to get from the deepest parts of Central America to the American southern border. What we often find is that there are massive numbers of illegal immigrants who have already started to make the trek and have decided, you know what, because Donald Trump's president, we're going to go back home. We heard today about a Honduran group of migrants who decided they're just going to go back home because they recognize that under Donald Trump's leadership, we take border enforcement seriously. Thank you all. Take care.
Do you agree with it? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that. Don't leave. We'll talk about that. Our enemy now holds Sector Delta. Hello, everybody. So before we begin, we're going to talk about how good some of these numbers are, be way ahead of schedule, especially as respect to manufacturing and manufacturing jobs. It's taking hold, and we've only been here a few weeks, but it's really, it's going to be something. I don't know if the rest of the world likes it, but people in the U.S. like it. That I can tell you. If I might, could you talk about the student loan situation, please?
So later this afternoon, we're going to have prepared for your signature an executive order dealing with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a program that's designed to expedite basically the conclusion of payments on student loans for people who have taken out federally backed student loans. The problem, though, is that a lot of these people work for NGO organizations, for nonprofit organizations that engage in illegal or what we would consider to be improper activities, supporting, for example, illegal immigration or foreign terrorist organizations or otherwise law-breaking activities. So this executive order will direct your Department of Education and Department of the Treasury to basically bring about modifications to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program in order to ensure that people who are engaged in these sorts of activities can't benefit from a program that's really not intended to support those sorts of things.
And what are the consequences if they are not good?
The consequences would be that they wouldn't get forgiveness of their student loans as they would be eligible for if they were working for the government or a normal nonprofit that's not violating the law.
All right. Any questions on that? Anybody have any questions? So we'll talk about the manufacturing turnaround, and it's been very early, but it's pretty significant. The numbers were much better, as you know, than projected by the media, and a little surprising, actually, how strong, how fast, because we have many companies are moving into our country. As you probably know, it's a statistic that everyone talks about, but nobody seems to have done much about. Since the beginning of NAFTA, there's been 90,000 plants and factories closed in this country. Think of that. 90,000 plants and factories have been closed in this country. Many of them have been car manufacturing plants. And that's a terrible statistic, and we'll be turning that around. You're going to see it already. We already have numerous that are being built or starting to be built, and numerous that were being built in other countries, and they stopped, and they're coming here now because of the tariffs. And that's a big deal. That's what you want to hear. During the last year, the Biden administration saw a loss of more than 110,000 manufacturing jobs, or 9,000 manufacturing jobs every single month. It averaged about 9,000 a month, 110,000 manufacturing jobs. During the first full month in office, we've not only stopped that manufacturing collapse, but we've begun to rapidly reverse it and get major gains. We created 10,000 manufacturing jobs in February alone. That hasn't happened in a long time. And these aren't government jobs, which actually we cut. These are private sector manufacturing jobs. So we gained all of those jobs, 10,000 jobs, and we barely started yet. That's a very unusual number. People are surprised by it. I'm even a little surprised. On auto jobs, we created almost 9,000 new jobs in the auto production field. And the reason for that is largely they think things are happening, so they're already geared up. In some cases, they had rooms in their plants, or they had empty plants that they were able to put into use quickly because they see because of the tariffs, they don't want to be dealing with other places, and they don't want to go back and forth and around and through the borders and across Mexico border and Canada border and all of. They want to have the jobs in one location. And they've had space, and if they had space, they were able to create the jobs almost immediately. In some cases, they'll be building plants to take care of those jobs. So we created 9,000 new jobs already in the auto production, auto parts manufacturing. So we want the auto parts ideally, and I think from a simplicity standpoint too, to be built and made in the United States. It's in a single month. That all took place in a single month, 9,000 new auto jobs. You haven't heard that in a long time. After auto workers lost more than 27,000 auto jobs in the final year of Biden. These are also high-paying jobs. These are very prime jobs. The ISM Manufacturing Survey and the S&P Manufacturing Survey have also confirmed that our administration is presiding over a brand new domestic manufacturing boom after major collapse under Biden. It was a collapse. All he did is keep adding new government jobs, which are not the jobs you want. We're trying to shrink government and grow the private sector. That's what we've been doing. Under the final 2 years of Biden, 1 in every 4 jobs created in America was a government job. That's a tremendous percentage. But under the first full month of President Trump, which we haven't even gotten started yet, an incredible 93% of all job gains were in the private sector. So that statistic just came out. Big gains for native-born Americans. For the first time in 15 months, the job gains for native-born Americans, for American people born in America, exceeded job gains for migrant and foreign-born workers. This is the first time that's happened in more than 15 months. Employment for native-born workers went up by 284,000, while foreign-born workers went down by 87,000. Now, you've heard the same stat where foreign workers were taking up